So we are going to do entrepreneurship and communication. Entrepreneurship and communication. The topic is nature of business communication. This is topic 7 in the syllabus. And we start by defining the term communication. And communication simply means transfer of information through a medium from the sender to the receiver, Then we also need to understand the elements of the communication process. Elements of communication process. What is involved in the entire process of communication, which is the same as we look at the elements, we also need to understand the process of communication. And which is the process of communication? The first is that the sender is the first process, or the first element, will generate a what? Will generate a message. He will generate a message, and then he will, or we can also use the word, he will encode. He will encode a message, and then he will choose a medium, also called channel. He will choose a medium, also called channel. Once he chooses a channel or the medium to transmit his message, then he will transmit that message to who? To the receiver, and the receiver will do what? Will do decoding. The receiver will do the decoding and send feedback, back to who? Send feedback back to the sender. Send feedback back to the sender. So when you talk about the elements of the communication process, therefore, we have the sender. Number 2, encoding. Number 2 is what? Encoding. Then we have the message. We also have the channel, also called medium. We also have the receiver. We also have the decoding, and we also have the feedback. How do we define the sender? The sender is the origin of the communication. The person who, the origin of the communication. So we can define him as the origin of the communication. He's the one who initiates the communication process. He initiates the communication process. So this is the initiator of the communication. He's the initiator of the communication. Then what is encoding? How do we define the term encoding? This is converting. Encoding means converting ideas into message. You convert ideas into message. This is converting ideas into message. And then what is a message? This is the actual information to be communicated, information to be communicated. And then we move to the channel. And what is a channel? The channel is the medium of communication, the media of communication. And who is the receiver? The receiver is the target of the communication process. He's the target of the communication. We can also call him, he's the one who decodes. He decodes the information. He decodes the message. What is to decode? Decoding means to attach meaning to the message. 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 And what is feedback? Response. Feedback means response. Feedback means response of the receiver to the sender. Response of the receiver to the sender. Response of the receiver to the sender. The response of the receiver to whom? To the sender. So that's what it means by, by feedback. Now, all these are called functional elements. They are also called functional elements. There is one element of communication process that is dysfunctional. How many elements do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The 8th element is a dysfunctional element. It interferes with the communication process. And the 8th element is called noise. Noise is the dysfunctional. It is dysfunctional because it is any barrier to the communication process. It is any barrier to the communication process. It is barrier to the communication process. It is the barrier to the communication process. Barrier to the communication process. So that's why it is called a dysfunctional element. It interferes. It's any interference. It is any interference with the communication process. It is any interference with the communication process. So we proceed on to look at the characteristics of communication. Characteristics of communication. Characteristics of communication. So we are going to look at the characteristics of communication. Characteristics of communication. And we are going to discuss all of them. We are going to discuss all the characteristics of communication. Which are these characteristics? Which are these characteristics of communication? One, there is interchange of information, exchange of information between, that is exchange of information. In the exam, you have to explain. We are going to be listing them, but you have to explain. There's exchange of information between who? The sender and who? And the receiver. The sender and the receiver. It's a continuous process. Continuous process. Why? You could see from the process that once the feedback is given by the receiver, then the receiver will attach a meaning to that. The sender will attach a meaning to the feedback and send back a message again. So it continues. Is that okay? It's indeed, we always say it's cyclic in nature. It's continuous. It's a continuous. It's cyclic. You know, it's a cyclic in nature. Then it's a social activity. Social activity. It's a social activity. Then brings mutual understanding. Brings mutual understanding. Brings mutual understanding. Brings mutual understanding. And then there is, it's universal, universal, it's universal, that's another function. And then there is a response given by it, there is a response given by the receiver. There is a response given by the receiver. There is a response given by the receiver. Then we look at purpose of communication. Purpose of communication. Purpose of communication. And then another thing that I would also want to say as very important characteristic, it's a two-way process. It is a two-way process. It's a two-way process. It's also a characteristic. What are the purpose? One, to inform. Inform. Two, to persuade. Persuade. Three, to control. Control. That is to give instructions. Give instructions. Give instructions. And number four, to coordinate. to coordinate. Number 5, to direct. Number 6, to explain. 7, organizing and planning. And even to motivate. Those are the where communication is used. And we looked at the process. We said it starts from the message encoding to the medium, to the receiver, to decoding, and then it continues like that. Are we together so far? Are we together? Yes. So as we said, what does the receiver do? We said the receiver is the one who does what? Who receives the communication. He's also the one who does what? Who decodes, and also he also was the one to give, to understand, and also even to give feedback. Does he give feedback? Yeah, it's the receiver who does what? Who give feedback upon getting the communication. He's the one who gives feedback upon getting communication. We are going now to look at internal and external communication. Internal, I hope you've written this. Can I run? Internal and external communication. Internal and external communication. Internal and external communication. Some communications are internal in nature, whereas others are external communication. Internal and external communication. Internal and external communication. Internal and external communication. So we are going to look at them. So internal is communication within an organization. Communication within an organization. Communication within an organization. That's what we call internal communication. Communication within organization. And which are the examples of internal communication? What is the, so media for internal communication, medium. We said you have to use a medium. Medium is the channel. For instance, medium or examples of internal communication, medium or examples of internal communication, which is the medium or examples of the internal communication. Number 1, we have formal meetings. Number 2, we have email. We can also use email. Number 3, we can also use intranet. Number 4, we have webinars. We can also use webinars at Zoom, webinars. We can use Zoom, we can use Google Meet. Then we can also use, what else can we use internally? What else can we use internally? Newsletters. Memos. We can also use memos. Which other medium? Kindly, I want you to chat me. I want you guys to chat me. I want you people to chat me. So which other medium can we use? Which other medium can we use internally for communication? Communication internally as an organization. Yes? Yes? So that's what we are calling memos. We use memos and letters, among others. So we also need to look at the external communication process. External is communication with whom? With our customers. So external communication is communication with our external stakeholders. Communication with external stakeholders. Communication with external stakeholders. Communication with external stakeholders. E.g. Who do we communicate with externally? The groups that we communicate with externally. For instance, we communicate with the community. We communicate with our suppliers. We communicate with our customers. We communicate with the government. Externally, we also communicate with our competitors. And the methods, mode of external communication. We have, number one, we can communicate through press release, media. We communicate through media, newspapers. That's what we are calling press release. Number two, we can also communicate through social media. We can communicate through social media like Facebook and Twitter. We can also communicate through webinars. Like you can see CASNEB. CASNEB, we are customers to CASNEB. The students to CASNEB are customers to CASNEB. It communicates regularly through webinars. We can also communicate through brochures. So another way is through letters. Even meetings like e.g. AGM, it can hold meetings. Then we can also communicate through reports. So I said, for external communication, we can do press release, which is also social media. We can communicate through webinars. We can communicate through brochures. We can communicate through letters. We can communicate through meetings. We can also communicate through reports. We can also communicate through reports. I would also want us to understand whether we are communicating internally or externally, which factors do we consider when choosing the media of communication. So we look at the factors to consider when choosing the media of communication. Factors to consider when choosing the media of communication. Whether we communicate internally or through meetings, which factors should we take into consideration when choosing the media of communication? So that's what we're going to look at. And I would like your participation in this. So how do we go about? So when choosing the media of communication, we can just brainstorm. So factors to consider when choosing the media of communication. Factors to consider when choosing media of communication. Number one, affordability. Number one is affordability, or you can also call it as cost. Is it economical? Number two, what else do you take into consideration? I'm going to get the answers from you people. Just write to me. I'm waiting for you to write the factors to consider when choosing the media of communication. Which other factors do you take into consideration when considering when choosing the media to communicate through? Number two, I like it from Kuya Nasim. Not seeing very well, repeat the meaning of so urgency. For instance, if it is something that requires urgency, do you start writing letters? No, you need to make a phone call. Is that okay? Yes. So so number three, reliability. Very true. Reliability. So reliability. For instance, which media is more reliable than the other? Written or oral communication media. Written is more reliable because it is, so for instance, you can write written is more reliable is more reliable. Written means, like memos, is more reliable because it is not subject to what? To distortion. Is that okay? It is not, it cannot be distorted. Number 3, 4, need for future reference. Need for future reference. For instance, if you start selling, you did not tell us. You did not tell us. Through in meetings, you can say somebody did not tell you. Is that okay? But if you tell me through an email, I can retrieve what? An email and tell you that I communicated to you people through what? Through email. Is that clear? I communicated to you on email. Can you trace? Then I trace for you the email that I communicated to all of you and I show you. Or maybe I sent you a message on WhatsApp, on our group WhatsApp. And I tell you, did I not tell you? I can show you the WhatsApp message that I sent you. Is that okay? So written means is more, there is, you can refer. Then distance, you also need to consider distance. For instance, we can hold webinars even with people in America. Is that clear? But can we hold physical meetings? They have to travel all along. Is that clear? But webinars we can hold across the world with people across the world. In terms of cost, I've also discussed that. And then confidentiality, need for 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 confidentiality. And when it comes to need for confidentiality, which is the best means? Which is the best means? Oral sometimes can be more confidential. If I tell you like a message, I'm certainly not going to show someone else. Is that clear? Yeah. So then what else is the audience characteristics? Audience characteristics, e.g. literacy level, e.g. literacy levels. For instance, if the people are not educated, then you are going to use which means? Oral. Is that clear? If the people are not so educated, you can use the oral means. Is that clear? Because when you start using the jargon or technical ones, then they may not understand what you are trying to say. So we have discussed the means of communication, the considerations that you take into the considerations or the factors that you take into consideration when choosing the media of communication, even when choosing, if the examiner also happens to ask the form, because we're also going to discuss the form of communication. We say the media of communication or the form of communication, and the media, largely, most of them will fall under either written or oral. Is that clear? Because press release is written, social media is written, webinars they are electronic. Even social media is electronic. We can also, brochures are written, letters are written, meetings are oral, then reports are written. So let's look at the media of communication. We categorize them. We categorize them into either, so forms of communication, that's what we're going to look at. Forms of communication. Forms of communication, which we've also said, we can also refer to it as media of communication. And we are going to say they fall under the following. 1, we have written communication, written, and 2, these are the 2 major forms of communication. 1, written, and 2, oral. We can also have it as verbal, and number 4, we can also talk about non-verbal, and we can also talk about visual communication. So those are the media or forms of communication. Those are the forms of communication. What do we mean by verbal? Verbal communication, verbal means use of language, and can either be, which can either be written or oral. Meaning both written and oral are verbal communication means. Is that clear? Because we are using words. In both of them, we are using words. We are using words. We are using word. I'm going to give you more answers in regard to, hey, you had in regard to the factors to consider when selecting the media of communication. Another you can add is nature of the message. Add more, nature of the message. Kindly add that one, nature of the message. Nature of the message. Nature of the message. Now, based on what we've discussed, we say that verbal is use of language which can either be written or oral. Whereas, what is oral communication? This use of spoken words, use of spoken words, use of spoken words. Whereas, written means use of written words, use of written words. Whereas, nonverbal means, what is nonverbal communication? What is use of signs to communicate, use of signs, and then use of visual means use of imagery, use of imagery. So that's all about. So why would I use oral communication? Advantages based on the factors we discussed, or factors to consider when choosing the media of communication. Factors to consider when choosing the media of communication. Now, I want to use oral communication. So, what is advantages of oral communication? Advantages of oral communication. Advantages of oral communication. What are the advantages of oral communication? One, it is cost, it's affordable, or it's economical. It's what? Why is it economical? I don't have to sit down and write. Is that clear? Oral communication is economical. Number two, time saving. Time saving. You can see we are repeating the same answers to do with factors. For instance, if the communication is urgent, then you go for oral communication. Three, it's flexible. Flexible. Or in other words, immediate feedback. There is immediate feedback. Immediate feedback. What are we saying? That it gives an opportunity to the sender to clarify. Is that clear? It gives him to clarify. And then there is personal touch. Personal touch, or more persuasive. It's more persuasive. So you can imagine if you're in marketing. If you're in marketing and you're selling a product, if you do a letter, people don't read letters. But if you go and hold a meeting and then you convince them, you demonstrate, then it's more convincing. Kindly give me other answers. And then we had also said there is that maintenance of secrecy. There is maintain secrecy. It's more secret, so more confidential, more confidential, and then can be used in group communication. 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 So I want you to chat me and give me more advantages of oral communication. Give me more advantages of oral communication, kindly. Give me more advantages of oral communication. Give me more advantages of oral communication. Why should we prefer oral communication to written? Why would you go for oral communication to written communication? Why would you go for oral communication rather than written communication? Another? So another one is immediate feedback, flexible, quick response. Quick response. You get a quick response. You get a quick response. Another advantage. I'm trying to get your chats. Online students, kindly chat me. Chat me, please. I want you to chat. I want you guys to chat me. Why should we go for oral communication? So let me read your chat. Let me read your chat. So Edina is saying, good for, yeah. Very true, Edna. So it's appropriate for illiterate persons. Is that true? Appropriate for persons with low literacy levels. For persons with low literacy levels. You're not going to communicate to your shosho in written forms with people with low literacy levels. So you can communicate to people with low literacy levels. So that's another advantage. But then at times it's not a good way. So let's look at the disadvantages of oral communication. Let's look at the disadvantages. Let's look at the disadvantages of oral communication. Disadvantages of oral communication. Disadvantages of oral communication or limitations. Disadvantages also means the limitations. And number one, so lack of reference, no reference. And you see, if the examiner happens to ask you disadvantages of written communication, then you use these advantages. Is that clear? For instance, disadvantages of written communication: one, it's costly; two, it's time consuming; three, no immediate feedback; four, there is no personal touch; it's less confidential; cannot be used in group communication; and then it's not appropriate for persons with low literacy levels. So, and then no reference. Two, not suitable for lengthy messages. Not suitable for lengthy messages. Not suitable for lengthy messages. What do we mean? For instance, if we imagine, can we do the whole of business law or the whole of entrepreneurship through oral communication without writing notes? You can't. Is that clear? There are some messages that you cannot, so then we've said can be distorted, can be distorted. It can be distorted. And number four, what is the other limitation of oral communication? What is the other limitation? What is the other limitation of oral communication? So you said no reference, not suitable for lengthy messages, can also be distorted. With oral communication, they can be distorted. Kindly chat me. I'm waiting for your chats. Kindly chat me. I'm waiting for your chats. What are the other limitations of oral communication? What is the other limitation of oral communication? Another limitation is that cannot be used as evidence in the court, cannot be used as evidence in a court of law, And still, you'll also find lack precision. So in other words, precise means brevity. It means brevity. So unlike with the written communication, you can be precise. Is that clear? With written communication, you can be what? You can be precise. So we now move to written communication. Written communication. written communication. And what do we mean by written communication? What do we mean by written communication? What do we mean by written communication? And therefore, written communication is communication through written words. 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 So we look at the advantages of written communication. Advantages of written communication. Advantages of written communication. So that's what you're going to discuss. Advantages of written communication. What are the advantages of written communication? One, permanent record. It's a permanent record. Even the examiner might also test characteristics of written communication. You just give the same. Is that clear? There is a permanent record that can be referred to. Number two, precision and accuracy. Precise and accurate. Precise and accurate. Precise and accurate. And number three, can be used as legal evidence. Can be used as legal evidence. Can be used as legal evidence. And number four, wide coverage. Is that clear? For instance, you can do an email to so many people at once. Is that clear? Yeah, wide coverage. Wide coverage. Though even in oral, with the emergence of all of the electronic means, like now I'm communicating to so many students and I'm using the oral communication. Is that clear? So electronic means has really changed the way people communicate, even orally. You don't have to communicate orally to one person. You can communicate to a group through oral communication. 3.5, suitable for lengthy message. Suitable for lengthy messages. Suitable for lengthy messages. Suitable for lengthy messages. And number 6 is that it's easy to understand. Easy to, so cannot be distorted. Cannot be distorted. Cannot be distorted. What are the disadvantages of written communication? What are the disadvantages of written communication? And this examiner might ask you, when is written communication appropriate? Which answers do you give the examiner? You know, the examiner will twist the question. When is the written communication appropriate? What do you tell him? The advantages. You tell him it's appropriate if there is a need for permanent records. It's appropriate when there is a need to maintain precision and accuracy. It is appropriate when that information is necessary for keeping legal evidence. It's appropriate even when we want to cover a wide group of people, and it's also suitable for lengthy messages, and it's appropriate when there is a need to have the message not distorted, when there is a need not to have the message distorted. And then we've also talked about you can be referred, future reference. That's also an advantage, future reference. You can refer to written communication as many times as possible. You can refer to written communication as many times as possible. But then it is also has some disadvantages. One of the disadvantages of written communication, time consuming. It's time consuming. Time consuming. Number 2, it's rigid. It's rigid. You remember we talked about oral communication being flexible. So there is no, so 3, delayed feedback or no quick response, delayed feedback. And number 4, it's costly. It's costly. And number 5, lack of secrecy. People can share letters, lack of secrecy. I'll even photocopy to you the letter he wrote. You get it? Yeah. Lack of secrecy. And then too much paperwork. too much paperwork, too much paperwork, too much paperwork. So those are some of the disadvantages of written communication. Those are some of the disadvantages of written communication. So we now look at nonverbal communication. We proceed to look at nonverbal communication. So if you have any query, kindly chat me on WhatsApp, chat me on Zoom. So kindly chat me on Zoom. I would prefer you chat me on Zoom. Chat me on Zoom, please. Chat me on Zoom. So we look at the nonverbal communication. Nonverbal communication. We proceed on to look at nonverbal communication. Nonverbal communication. We look at the nonverbal communication. So that's what you're going to discuss. So nonverbal communication. And this is use of body movements, use of body movements, gestures, and eye movements, during communication, Basic types of nonverbal communication, are the following. Basic types of nonverbal communication are the following. Basic types of nonverbal communication are the following. So we have 4 basic types. One, we have proxemics. Proxemics is use of space. For instance, if you go to an office and you find that somebody has been given a spacious office, what does that communicate? That's a communication. If you come to my office and you find that I have a big space, then it communicates power. Is that clear? E.g., use of space. So a large space in the office, communicates power. So if you find people, I'm giving you examples of use of proxemics, and proxemics means space, use of space to communicate. If you find people, a girl and a boy, and the space they are maintaining is so small, or maybe they are holding one another, what does that communicate? They are in love. Is that clear? They are in love. So that use of proxemics, so space is also used to do what? To communicate. Is that clear? Yeah. Number 2, we have kinesics. That is body movement, use of body movement. And body movement, is it used to communicate? Yeah, because like now I'm here, I'm not standing at one point. Is that clear? From effective communication, you have to use body movements to communicate. Is that clear? Then another one is facial expression. Facial expression communicates. So if you have, like, it communicates, if I'm happy, you can be able to know somebody is happy through facial expression. Is that clear? You can know someone who is sad. It can communicate sadness, it can communicate happiness, it can communicate anger. You know, facial expression can be used to communicate certain attitudes or certain behavior. So facial expression can be able to, e.g., communicating anger, happiness, sadness, among others. So you can use facial expression. Then eye contact. So what does it communicate? Eye contact can communicate interest. It can communicate interest. It can communicate attention, or lack of attention, or lack of attention and interest. Lack of attention and interest. If somebody is keeping an eye contact, it means interest. Is that clear? Yeah. And then we also talk about paralanguage. And what is paralanguage? Paralanguage simply means variation in speech. Variation in speech. Variation in speech. For instance, if I tell someone, come here. You see, I'm using words to say, come here. It means I'm polite. You're getting? But if I tell someone, come here, then are you getting the variation in speech? That's what you're saying, paralanguage. It means, come here. I'm shouting, I'm commanding, I'm giving a command. Is that clear? But then if I tell somebody, just come here, I'm being kind to that person. Is that clear? Yeah. So paralanguage, variation in speech, is also a nonverbal cue. Note that the examiner might ask you nonverbal communication or nonverbal cues. Cues in communication. So those are some of the nonverbal cues in communication. Do we have, what is the importance of nonverbal communication? Importance of nonverbal communication. Is it necessary? Importance of nonverbal communication. Importance of nonverbal communication. How is it necessary in communication? How is it necessary in communication? How is it necessary in communication? Number one, it complements verbal communication. Complements verbal communication. If we imagine I'm here, I've been in this class and I'm just using the words. How would be the class? It's not complete. Is that true? But then when complementing means completing, making it look more credible. So it makes it, for instance, another way, by the way, another way, number 6. Let's also put number 6, use of gestures. You can see I'm using gestures. Use of gestures is also a nonverbal communication cue. It's also a nonverbal communication. It's also a nonverbal communication tool to communicate. Then it is more credible. It is more credible. It's more credible. It communicates true feelings. For instance, by my face, I cannot pretend to be happy, yet I'm sad. Is that clear? But then orally, I can tell someone I am happy. No, I'm okay. But if you look at the face, you can see that the person is what? Is sad. So it's more credible. It's more genuine. It's more genuine. It communicates true feelings. It communicates true feelings. Then it's efficient. It is efficient. It is efficient. It is efficient and effective. It is efficient and effective. It is efficient and effective. So those are some of the reasons why we would prefer to use nonverbal and not the verbal communication. I think we also looked, can you remember the importance of communication? We said in organizations. How is it used in organizations? The same way we said importance of communication, to direct, that's to give instructions. Is that true? To motivate, did we say that? Then another benefit? To to persuade, even to control, for planning and organizing, among others, even to inform. Is that clear? To inform. And it can be used both internally and externally. It can be used both internally and externally. Let's look at channels of communication. Channels of communication. We're going to discuss channels of communication. We're going to discuss channels of communication. Channels of communication. And when talk of channels or channels, is it channels or channels of communication? They can either be verb, they can either be formal or informal. They can either be formal or informal. They can either be formal or informal. And when they are formal communication channels include, they can either be vertical, horizontal, or diagonal. They can either be formal, horizontal, or diagonal. Informal channels are also, we can use the word grapevine, you know, in which language? The grapevine communication. Grapevine communication is in our informal language, in our Sheng. You've ever heard of Moshene? Is it in organizations? Is Moshene in organizations? Moshene means talking informally, that in the organization you are talking about so and so. Do you know her husband works at where? Hey, oh, she's the one who she's the husband who bought for her that car. You getting? You are talking about other people in organizations. Does it happen in organizations? It happens a lot. Is that clear? And that's what you're going to refer to as the grapevine communication, also called informal communication. So we are going to start with formal communication. We're going to start with the formal communication. We're going to start with the formal communication. And formal channels of communication, we've said, they can either be vertical, horizontal, or diagonal. And what is a formal? It is formal communication. We start by defining what it means by formal communication channel. Formal channels of communication. Formal channels of communication. Formal channels of communication. What does this mean? What does the term formal channels of communication mean? This means officially prescribed communication channels. 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 They can be them, so that's what it means. Formal channels of communication, officially prescribed communication channels. They are vertical. They are either vertical, horizontal, or diagonal. So let's start with vertical. And vertical means communication. It can either be upward or downward. Are we together? So vertical communication, we start with vertical communication. It means communication moves either upward or downward. Communication moves either upward or downward. Communication moves either upward or downward. What are we saying? Vertical communication means that communication moves either upward or downward. So meaning here we have the manager to the employee. Communication can either be this. So if it is from the manager to the employee, that communication is what? That's from the manager to the employee? No, where should we put the employee? So upward communication is, what do we mean by upward communication in the first place? Yes? So upward communication means from there to the manager. Is that clear? So this is upward communication, whereas from the manager to the employee, that is, are we together? Are we together? This is downward communication. Are we together? Yes. So you said it can either be upward or downward. It can either be upward or downward. So kindly draw that. Draw that. So we look at the benefits of downward communication. Benefits of downward. So we say downward communication is the communication from the manager to the employees, whereas upward communication is the communication from the employees to the managers. So let's uses of downward communication, uses or benefits of downward communication. How do we use it? Uses or benefits? Uses stroke benefits of downward communication. Uses or benefits of downward communication. Uses or benefits of downward communication. So the manager is communicating to the employees. Why do they communicate to the employees? One, to instruct, give instructions, to give instructions, to give instructions. So the manager will communicate to the employee to give what? To give instructions. Then to do what? Also to motivate. To motivate. You've done a good, nice job. Congratulations. Motivate. Motivate. 3. Why would also give? To training. Why else would you communicate to the manager? Would the manager communicate to the employee? Why would the manager communicate to the employee? Yeah, controlling, direct. So giving instructions also means directing, controlling. Performance evaluation. Performance evaluation. To correct employees. To give feedback. Yeah, so those are the reasons why the manager will communicate downward. Then what is the benefits of upward communication? What are the benefits of the upward communication? What are the benefits of upward communication? Benefits of upward communication. Benefits of upward communication. Why would the employees communicate to the manager? Why would the employee communicate to the manager? For what? Which benefits is upward communication? To? Yeah, so to give proposals, to give ideas and proposals, to give ideas and proposals. to give ideas and proposals, to communicate what? To report, to give reports, to give reports, to give reports. 3, why else would the manager communicate to the, why would the employee communicate to the managers? Another reason. Yeah, to raise complaints, to raise complaints, to raise complaints, to raise complaints, to raise complaints. Number 4, why else would they communicate? Why else would they communicate? Why else would the employee communicate to the manager? So kindly, I want to read your charts. On your charts, kindly give me your charts. Why would the employee communicate to the manager? Why would the employee communicate to the manager? I'm waiting for your charts, kindly. I'm waiting for your charts. Why would the employee communicate with the manager? So you said to give ideas and proposals, to give reports, to raise complaints. So you are communicating what to your manager? To seek clarification, to seek clarification, to seek clarification. He'll also communicate to seek guidance, to seek guidance, to seek guidance, to seek guidance. You'll seek guidance from your boss. So you'll seek guidance from your boss. Also to give feedback, to give feedback, or to report progress, to report progress, report progress, report progress. So that's it, that's it. Then we've also said, we said that for formal communication processes, we said they can either be vertical. What did we say? They can either be vertical or horizontal, and therefore, or diagonal. And now, vertical, you can find that people are not of the same status. People who are not of the same status communicating. For instance, a manager with the employee, or the employee with the manager. But what happens with horizontal communication? Horizontal communication involves people of the same level communicating. People of the same level communicating. For instance, we have the head of finance communicating with the head of sales department. That is horizontal communication. So we can look at it. We can look at it. So horizontal, also called lateral communication. Horizontal, also called lateral communication. And this is communication between persons of the same level in the organization, between persons of the same level, and the status. Communication between people, persons of the same level and status in the organization, Why would the people of the same, e.g., we can give example, e.g., HOD, head of department in finance, communicating with head of department, with HOD, human resource management. That is horizontal communication. That is horizontal communication. Why would it be necessary? Why do they communicate? One, they communicate, so uses of horizontal communication. Uses of horizontal communication. And number one is coordination. You use it for coordination. They need to coordinate. 2, for instance, we have one boardroom in the organization, so we need to share that boardroom. So number 2, sharing of resources. Sharing of resources. Sharing of resources. Why else do you think horizontal communication is necessary. Why else would it be necessary for them to communicate? Why would they communicate? One, you said coordination, sharing of resources. Kindly, I'm waiting for your charts. I'm waiting for your charts. Why do they communicate? Why do people of the same level in the organization? Number three, they're very good to, that is from Nasimiu, exchange of ideas, exchange of ideas, exchange of ideas, exchange of ideas. Why else do they communicate? Planning, planning, for planning purposes, for planning, for planning. Why else do they communicate? Planning and organizing, planning and organizing, organizing, organizing. Are you together? Why else do they communicate? Yes? Yeah, so then I'm told by SK to exchange ideas and exchange of ideas and seek advice, seeking advice, seeking advice. For instance, you'll find that the finance department, they want to fire some people. Right together. He will seek advice from who? From the human resource. He will have to seek advice from human resource. So you find that we also have diagonal communication. So that's the next type of communication we are going to discuss. Diagonal communication. Diagonal communication. What do we mean by diagonal? Diagonal communication. It means now you find that vertical communication was the person. We have the human HOD, human resource management, communicating with maybe HR officer, communicating with the HR officer. And we said that kind of communication is the downward communication. Is that clear? Then we've also said the HR officer can also communicate to human HOD, human resource, which is upward communication. We've also said the HOD can also communicate with the HOD finance. That's what? That is horizontal communication. That's horizontal communication? What if the HOD finance was to communicate to the HR officer? You know, they are not in the same level. Okay, they are not in the same level, and yet they are not in the same department. Is that clear? So that is what now we call diagonal communication. And therefore, we're going to write people. So communication between people who are not in the same department, communication between people, between persons, communication between persons who are not in the same department, who are not in the same department, they are not in the same department, and they are not in the same level, and they are not in the same level or level and status. E.g., HOD finance communicating with a junior staff, in HR department, communicating with a junior staff in HR department. That's what we are calling diagonal communication. The purpose is the same, to exchange ideas. Is that clear? To give instructions, to motivate, to coordinate, to plan, and organize. So the purpose of diagonal communication, because at once in a while you'll find that even people, but then there is a problem. What are the problems of diagonal communication? We can look at the problems that may arise. So problems of diagonal communication, problems of diagonal or limitations of diagonal communication. What can it do? Conflicts. It can raise conflicts. Can raise conflicts. Raise conflicts. It can raise conflicts. Once now the HOD, HRM knows that the HOD finance has been communicating with HR officer without involving him, then there will be conflicts. Is that true? There will be issues. Are we together? Yeah. Then it can also, you find that it will also lead to confusion and lack of order. 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 Because the HROD, HRM is not involved in those communications. They're not involved in those communications. And then another problem it may raise, you'll also find that once the HOD finance is communicating directly with the HR officer without involving. So we are saying this is the diagonal communication. These arrows are not there. The HOD, HRM is not involved. So this is diagonal. Diagonal communication. Then any communication between HOD, this is downward. Downward at the vertical, and this is upward. Upward communication. Then undermines the authority of the manager, undermines authority of the manager. So you are undermining the authority of the HOD, HRM. You are undermining or underrating the authority of the manager. So that's about communication, but then we need to summarize by looking at advantages of formal communication. 4 advantages of formal communication. Rather than communicating informally, why should the people communicate formally? Why, rather than communicating informally, why should people communicate formally? So we are going to look at the advantages of formal communication. Advantages of formal communication. Advantages of formal communication. Even though we've said diagonal communication is formal, it's a formal communication channel, most of the problems that come with informal communication are more or less the same problems to do with diagonal communication. So formal communication, there is order. There is order. And in exams, don't just write there is order. You know, this is more of helping you to know the points. But then in the exam, you have to do what? To elaborate your answers. Is that clear? Don't just write there is order and you leave it at that. Once you have a point, it's always easy to illustrate. Is that clear? Because once we have the communication lines clear, then there is orderliness in the organization. Then, number 2, reduced conflicts between managers. Reduced conflicts between managers. You just give us very small explanation between managers, reduced conflicts between managers. Between managers. 3, is a coordination. Is a coordination. Is a coordination. Is a coordination. Then motivation of employees. Motivation of employees. When you engage employees even in decision making, when you engage employees in decision making. For instance, even another way, another purpose of upward communication is even participation of the employees, so that employees are able to give out ideas. We said it. So it will motivate who? It will motivate the employees, motivation of employees. So you'll find that this is easy. It's easy for also for planning, necessary for planning and necessary for planning and organizing, necessary for planning and organizing, necessary for planning and organizing, necessary for planning and organizing. So that's it. That's about formal communication. That's about formal communication. That's about formal communication. So let's move to informal communication. Informal communication, that's what we're going to look at. This is use of what? Informal communication simply means use of so informal communication, channels of communication which are not officially prescribed. Informal communication, use of channels which are not officially prescribed, which are not officially prescribed, which are not officially prescribed. It is also called grapevine communication. It is also called grapevine communication. It's also called grapevine communication. It is also called grapevine communication. Why do you think? Is it necessary in organizations? It is. It's not. It is necessary in organization. So advantages of grapevine communication. Advantages of grapevine communication. Kindly, I want your answers. For instance, in the workplace, you go to the workplace and you are so stressed. Is that true? What do? When you go to the workplace and you are so stressed. When you go to the workplace and you are so stressed, you look for someone to talk out to. Is that clear? And you feel relieved. Are we together? So helps employees to vent their emotions, helps employees to vent out their emotions, We cannot only be so official in the organization. We need, we are people, we are human beings. We are subject to stress. We are subject to stress. And times we need someone to talk to. Do you agree? Yeah. And then another way is that enhances employees' cohesion. Enhances employees' cohesion. You'll find that like the female employees in organization, they are so cohesive because they talk out their personal issues so freely. Are you together? They talk their personal issues so freely. So they are so cohesive. So enhances employees' cohesion. People can be able to talk about, to share their personal issues, their personal stories, and that one enhances employees' cohesion. And then can be used to complement, can be used to complement. I said it is what? To do what? To enhance. It is used to, it's to enhance. To complement also means to enhance. For instance, I said nonverbal communication tools can be used to enhance verbal communication. For instance, I cannot study and just tweak the ones or sit down here. Is that clear? I have to keep moving. I have to use my gestures. Is that clear? I'm using the nonverbal communication to complement the verbal communication. Sometimes I'm shouting so that to emphasize. Indeed, another reason why we use nonverbal communication is to emphasize. Is that clear? Yeah, if you want to emphasize a point, then you can even you can use the paralanguage. You can do tonal variations to emphasize. At that point, that another purpose of nonverbal communication is to emphasize the verbal communication, to emphasize. So can be used to complement, formal communication channels. formal communication channels. Formal communication channels can be used to complement formal communication channels. That's another use. So even when you realize that when I use the upward communication, maybe the upward communication, employees are not willing to give me their complaints, then I can use one of the people to give me some information on what they are saying. You're getting? One of the employees to come to my office and tell me, what are they saying? You're getting? So I'm able to collect the complaints of the employees through grapevine. Wamesema, are you getting? Yeah? There's that one person who has courage and will go to that boss and tell him, hey. So you are now using the grapevine communication. He's going to collect that information from other employees and come and give you. Is that clear? And then we can also say another is to provide feedback to managers. Provide feedback to managers. Provide feedback to managers. Provide feedback to managers. To provide feedback to managers. I will say it can be used to complement, which also you can also use the word supplement. Complement or supplement. It can also be, it's fast. It's fast. It is fast. It is fast. And another use, maybe you want to introduce new proposals. What do you do first? Before you communicate officially, you can use the grapevine leader. You can use the grapevine leader. You give him that information so that he can go to tell the employees. For instance, you can tell the grapevine leader that we are making some proposals to give you salary cuts. Are you together? And then the grapevine leader will communicate, will know how to use the grapevine channels to spread that communication to who? To the employees. And then you will be able to know there, you'll be able to test the waters. Are you together? So can be used to test ideas and proposals before they are communicated, officially, before they are communicated officially. They can be used to test proposals and ideas before they are communicated officially, before they are communicated officially. So it's then they also, it's fast than formal communication channels, It's fast than formal communication channels. It's fast than formal communication channels. But do we have the disadvantages? When people communicate informally or through grapevine, it also has what? Disadvantages. So let's look at disadvantages of grapevine communication. Disadvantages of grapevine communication. Disadvantages of grapevine communication. Disadvantages of grapevine communication. And what is the, so one is that, is there conflicts? Would it lead to conflicts? So conflicts among employees. Hey, actually say manini together. What did you say about me? So people fight. Conflicts among employees. Conflicts among employees. Lack of order, and lack of order, or there is confusion. There is confusion. In other words, we are looking at the reasons why we need formal communication channels. They are looking at why we need formal communication channels. 3, misinformation. Misinformation. Number 3, there is misinformation. So the informal channels of the grapevine communication will lead to misinformation. So can spoil the image of the organization, can spoil the image of the organization, can spoil the image of the organization. And then it can be distorted, easily distorted, easily distorted. So it can be easily distorted. It can be easily distorted. Now, we've said that we need grapevine communication. As much as it has those problems, we need it in the organization. And why do we need it? Because the examiner will twist the question. It's not necessarily the examiner to ask you the advantages. The examiner can also ask you, why do we need grapevine communication in organization? What do you give him? The advantages. Is that clear? You tell him that it's necessary to enable employees to vent out their emotions. It also enhances employees' cohesion, can also be used to supplement or complement formal communication channels, to provide feedback to managers. It's fast, and it also can be used to test ideas. Now, because we need it, but though it is also destructive, grapevine communication can be destructive. In other ones, it can bring conflicts. How should managers, the question we are going to ask ourselves, how should managers use grapevine communication effectively? How should managers use grapevine communication effectively? How should managers use grapevine communication effectively? How should managers, so that's the question we're going to ask ourselves, how should managers use grapevine communication effectively? How should managers use grapevine communication effectively? So we are going to look at that. One is open door policy. Open door policy. What do we mean by open door policy? That managers are so open that you can easily meet the manager and talk to him. Is that clear? So if the office of the manager is, if the manager is approachable, so open door policy means having a manager who is easily approachable, to the employees, who is easily approachable to employees, who is easily approachable to employees. Are we together? Yes. So, meaning that employees can openly go to him and give him information, Then, another thing is managers should listen to employees. Managers should constantly listen to employees. Managers should constantly listen to employees. Managers should constantly listen to who? To employees, to know what is going on. So managers should keep good relations, managers should maintain good relationships, with employees, Then managers should also not ignore, managers should not ignore the formal channels of communication. Managers should not ignore formal channels. They should not ignore formal channels of communication. They should not ignore formal channels of communication. Indeed, they should clarify. We can add in they should clarify any information released through grapevine. to avoid misinformation. To avoid misinformation. To avoid misinformation. So they should clarify any communication given through grapevine to avoid misinformation. To avoid misinformation and even to avoid bad image to the organization. Now, we had said one of the dysfunctional element in the communication process, we called it noise. So we need to look at barriers to effective communication. We are going to look at barriers to effective communication. Barriers to effective communication. Barriers to effective communication. So that's what you're going to look at. Barriers to effective communication. Barriers to effective communication. Let's discuss it. Barriers to effective communication. Barriers to effective communication. What are the barriers to effective communication? And number one, or which this kind of noise, which is this kind of noise. And one, when we talk about noise, one, we can talk about, or we can look at it, types of noise. Types of noise. And number one, we talk about psychological noise. Psychological noise. And what do we mean by psychological noise? The attitudes you have. For instance, I come here and you have bad attitudes about you, the entrepreneurship and communication lecturer. Or you have a bad attitude towards the mathematics lecturer. So that's what used to happen in high school. So you cannot be able to, you don't take his information seriously. Is that clear? So that's one is, e.g., wrong attitudes and perceptions. Wrong attitudes and perceptions. Wrong attitudes and perceptions. Wrong attitudes and perceptions. Then we look at physical noise. We may also have physical noise, e.g., for instance, crowded rooms. You can't be able to concentrate. Dim lit room. Then we can also talk about what? The environmental noise. Maybe there is hooting by the vehicles. Hooting. So environmental noise. Then we look at another type of noise, which is called physiological. There is a difference between psychological and physiological. Physiological noise is the noise coming from the maybe hunger, you are hungry, hunger, sickness. Your body is affected. The body of maybe of the listener. Are we together? Then we also talk about semantic noise. E.g., jargon. Do you know what is jargon? What do we mean by the word jargon? Jargon is use of technical language. For instance, when you're talking to a lawyer and he's talking about nemodat, habet, nemodat what? Nemodat non-habet. What does that mean? If I talk to people who have not studied business law and I'm telling them a nemodat non-habet, we did it in the law of sale of goods. In the sale of goods, and an owner cannot transfer a good title. But then if you've not studied that, and I'm telling you nemodat non-habet, then I'm using what? I'm using legal jargon. It's noise. Is that clear? It's noise. So use of technical language. So those are some of the, then mechanical noise. mechanical noise. Mechanical noise. For instance, e.g. failure of internet. For instance, you are on Zoom. You're on Zoom. If your internet fails, you cannot be able to hear me clearly. Or maybe we are making a phone call and probably your phone has mechanical problems, e.g. failure of internet. Failure of internet. Failure of internet. That's also interferes with the communication. It also interferes with communication. So we finalize with measures to improve communication effectiveness. Measures to improve communication effectiveness. Measures to improve communication effectiveness. So that's what you're going to finalize with. Measures to improve communication effectiveness. Measures to improve communication effectiveness. So how can we improve the communication effectiveness? So let's write down measures to improve communication effectiveness. Measures to improve communication effectiveness. And number one is use of feedback. Is feedback necessary? Feedback is very necessary because it enables the sender to know whether the receiver understood the message. The sender is able to know whether the receiver understood the message. Then plan communication effectively. Plan communication effectively. Plan communication effectively. That's another way. Number three, use of nonverbal communication. Use of nonverbal communication to supplement or to complement verbal communication. To complement verbal communication. Use the nonverbal communication to complement the verbal communication. Avoid use of jargon. And we said, what is jargon? Technical language. That also makes the communication easy. It also makes the communication easy. And then undertake audience analysis. And which is this audience analysis? You need to understand your audience. Is that clear? Which communication tools? For instance, there's no way you're going to communicate to people in the village through Zoom. They may not they are not able to understand, they don't even understand that technology. But then young people would understand Zooms. Then you also need to know, for instance, you need to know what the audience know and what they don't know. Are we together? So which information do they already have? So that when you are packaging your information, you're able to package your information on the contents they may not know, so that you are able to sustain what? You are able to sustain their interest. Then listen to your audience. So those are some of the ways in which you can make communication effective. Those are some of the ways in which you can make communication effective. Those are some of the ways in which you can make communication effective. Hebu nicheze jamaa.